I was cast out by my family on Thanksgiving. 3 years later, I returned to buy back the company for a fraction of its worth and made them all bow their heads in silence. I still remember it vividly. That day was cold, but my heart felt warm. Strange, isn't it? The entire month before, I had been drained by year-end contracts, overlapping figures, and late-night meetings with the marketing team. And yet that day, Thanksgiving Day, I felt light, as if all that exhaustion had been worth it, as if I was about to receive something I truly deserved. I woke up at 6 a.m. and personally made the pecan pie my dad loved most, not because anyone told me to, simply because I wanted him to be proud. I had always wanted that, ever since I was little. A word of praise, a look of approval, even just a brief pat on the shoulder. Anything to let me know I was enough. In my mind, I had pictured him raising his glass, looking at me, and saying, "My daughter is amazing. I'm proud of you." I even thought maybe today he'd mention something about handing over the company. Not officially, but at least some kind of hint. I was the one who stayed, working tirelessly by his side every day. Not like my brother, who lived halfway across the country, rarely called, and probably couldn't even name 3 key employees. Dinner started at 6 p.m. The house was filled with the scent of roasted turkey and cranberry sauce. Mom wore her navy blue dress, the one she saved for special occasions. My brother came in with his wife and kids, all smiles. Dad sat at the head of the table, still with that commanding posture, back straight, eyes sharp, and a prideful air that inspired both respect and fear. I sat across from him, watching him smile, with a quiet joy building inside me. I thought, today will be a day to remember. And it was, just not in the way I ever imagined. Right after we finished the main course, Dad tapped his wine glass. The sound rang clear, like a bell announcing something important. I thought he was going to make a toast, like every year, but he didn't raise his glass. He just sat there, looked straight at me, and said, "Your mother and I have decided to sell the company." I froze. The papers were signed last week. The buyer is an old friend of mine. I looked up, turned to Mom. She didn't meet my gaze. My brother didn't look surprised. In fact, he smiled. Then Dad delivered the final blow, a short sentence, like a verdict. "You won't be getting anything." I didn't understand at first. I thought it was a joke, a jab, some kind of family play. But no one laughed. No one corrected him. Only silence, heavy and suffocating. I heard the faint clink of cutlery against plates, the distant giggles of children, and my heart pounded in my chest. I looked at the pecan pie, still warm on the table. No one touched it. No one mentioned it. I sat there in a room full of family, feeling more alone than ever. No one pushed me out. But I had just been cast out of the world I thought was mine. That Thanksgiving, I lost everything. And I realized one thing: family isn't always a place you can come home to. I first came to the company when I was 16, not because I needed a job, but because I thought it was the closest way to be near my father. My dad wasn't the kind of man who hugged his children or told stories. His love was measured in overtime hours, midnight meetings, and sharp glares whenever someone made a mistake. I believed that if I worked hard enough, he'd notice. If I proved my worth, he'd be proud. That was all I ever wanted. I started from the bottom: inventory, packing, answering phones. When I entered university, I studied and worked at the same time. Every break, I returned to the factory. I knew every employee, every product code, every customer habit. I'll never forget the night he almost fired 20 workers for delivering late to Walmart. I was the one who begged him to keep them. Then I rewrote the delivery process myself over 3 days. After that, we never missed a shipment again. I didn't just work. I lived in that company. I redesigned the logo, launched a TikTok channel to promote our products. I proposed replacing our outdated system with ERP. I was the only one who listened to employee complaints, the only one who stayed late, had a beer with the security guard, and listened to stories about how the company nearly went bankrupt in 2008. And when it almost happened again, During COVID, I was the one calling every old customer, every distributor, begging them for a 30-day extension. I worked 14 hours a day, with dark circles under my eyes and a body growing thinner by the week. Dad didn't say a word, just sent one text. If you can do it, do it. If not, quit. I kept going because I believed one day he'd see. I used to think maybe he just didn't know how to express affection. Maybe he loved me in his own way. Maybe I just needed to be patient a little longer, just a little longer, and he'd finally see me as a true successor. I never asked for a title, just a nod, a simple, "You did well." But that nod never came, and then on a Thanksgiving evening, I finally understood. I was never the heir. I was just a shadow, a placeholder, a tool to keep the company warm, so that when my brother returned, everything would still be in place for him to take over. I held the keys to the warehouse, but the door was never mine. The morning after Thanksgiving, I arrived at the company earlier than usual. The air was freezing, frost still covered the car windows, but I drove like a machine. I hadn't slept all night. I thought, maybe everything yesterday was just a misunderstanding. Maybe my father had spoken in the heat of the moment. Maybe he would explain. Maybe there was still something left unsaid. I still believed. But from the very first second I reached the office door, that belief began to crack. My access card didn't work. I tried again and again. The light stayed red. The glass door stayed cold and unmoving. I called the head of HR. No one answered. I opened my laptop, couldn't access the company email. I tried logging into the internal management system. Account locked. Like someone who had lost their mind, I drove straight to the factory on the outskirts. My name was still on the management board at the gate. I had personally redesigned the logo just last year. The old security guard saw me from afar and froze. His eyes looked unsure. He used to call me the youngest firekeeper of the company. I once helped his daughter apply for a scholarship, and yet today he spoke in a voice as soft as the wind. "Your dad told us, starting this morning, you're no longer employed here. You're not allowed in." I asked, "What did I do wrong?" He didn't answer, just lowered his head, like a man carrying guilt. I drove home, my heart in pieces, but the nightmare didn't end there. The apartment I'd been living in, the one I thought was a gift from Dad after last year's $1 million deal, turned out to be under the company's name. And since I was no longer an employee, I no longer had the right to stay. When I arrived, the locks had already been changed. The building manager looked at me and asked, "You're the former employee, right?" I couldn't answer. I just asked for 30 minutes to collect my belongings. They let me in, with a staff member standing watch at the door. I gathered 2 suitcases, 1 handbag. I left behind my desk, my bookshelf, the coffee mug collection I'd built up over 5 years. I left behind the picture frame of me and Dad from the factory grand opening. I didn't have enough hands, or maybe I no longer had enough faith to take it with me. That night, I slept in my car. The cold pierced through me. I parked near a gas station and curled up in the company jacket I used to wear every day. Now, the only thing I truly owned. I stared at the car ceiling, unable to cry. Not because I was strong, but because I was numb. Everything had happened too fast, too cold. I texted Dad. I want to know why. No reply. I called Mom. She didn't pick up. I called my brother. The line was out of service. I once believed the company was part of my family's flesh and blood. I believed that if I worked hard enough, sooner or later Dad would understand. I hoped that even if I wasn't the chosen one, at least I would be someone they remembered. But in the end, I was just an employee, a name on the payroll, a dot that could be erased. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the dark with the sound of trucks passing by, thinking quietly to myself, if they want to erase me from the story, then I'll write a new one without them. I lived in my car for nearly 2 weeks. In the mornings, I brushed my teeth at a gas station. At night, I charged my phone at a 24-hour cafe. I got a part-time job at a nearby print shop, labeling packages, fixing files, printing online orders. For the first time in years, I had to calculate every single expense. But I didn't break down. I didn't allow myself to. Every night, I opened my phone and started rewriting everything I had done at the company. I listed all the strategies I had proposed, the mistakes I had fixed, the lessons I had learned, lessons no one cared to hear. And then I realized I didn't need a building to begin. All I needed was a table, a Wi-Fi connection, and myself. I rented a tiny room, just big enough to fit an old wooden desk and a folding chair. I used the last of my savings, not enough to start a company, but enough to buy a domain name. It had only one word: rewrite, to write again, my life, with my own hands. I started a consulting service for small businesses. I didn't talk about success. I talked about betrayal, about how people can be kicked out of their own dreams and have to learn how to dream again from scratch. I wrote articles, I recorded videos, I told my story. No filters, no sugarcoating, just the truth. One video reached 200,000 views, then 500,000, then 1,000,000. I received an email from a single mom in Texas. "Thank you. I used to think I was worthless, but seeing you get back up made me want to try too." I cried. For the first time, not from loss, but because I knew I still had value. I was invited to speak at a startup conference. I wore an old dress from a thrift store. On stage, I talked about the night I slept in my car, holding onto the jacket with the company logo I once called family. The whole room gave me a standing ovation. I just smiled. In my head, I heard my father's voice. "If you can do it, do it. If not, quit." I did it. Not thanks to him, not because of him. I don't need anyone to give me a place to stand. I built my own stage. I don't know where the rumors started. All I know is that morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. "Your old company? It's being put up for sale. They're deep in the red. Looks like that brother of yours didn't know how to run it. There's an asset auction coming up. Are you planning to?" I wasn't planning anything. I just sat quietly, staring at the cup of coffee growing cold in front of me. 3 years, just 3 years after that fateful Thanksgiving, the empire that once belonged to my family was now on the liquidation list, quietly, without fanfare, and sadly, without much attention from anyone. I wasn't happy, I wasn't smug either. I just felt empty, as if an old, once blazing dream had now crumbled into scattered ashes. But I still went. No announcements, no press, no media. I attended the auction under the name of an investment group acting as my representative. I sat in the back, wearing sunglasses, silently observing every move. The company name was called. The starting bid was pathetically low, not even a fifth of what my father had once sold it for. The auctioneer asked if anyone would offer more. The room was dead silent. Then a man's voice spoke. "We propose to acquire all assets, including the brand, the factory, and the distribution system, at this price." Everyone turned to look. I didn't speak, just gave a subtle nod. The seller hesitated. The old family lawyer. He recognized me. I saw his gaze linger on me for a second longer than necessary, then turn away, as if he hadn't. Minutes later, the deal was sealed. Signatures were made, stamps pressed down. The company name, the lifeblood of my family, now belonged to me. This time truly mine. No one in my family was there. No dad, no mom, no brother, just me and the lawyer. As I was about to leave, he walked over and said softly, "I know, you didn't do this for the money." I smiled, no response needed. That night I returned to the old factory. No more machines, no more workers, just a vast emptiness and the lingering scent of oil in the wind. I stood before the wall where our family photo used to hang. It had been taken down long ago. I pulled out a scrap of paper and quickly scribbled a line. "I have forgiven, but I haven't forgotten." And I taped it right in the center of that bare wall. I don't need my father to know I came back. I don't need anyone in the family to look at me with regret. I don't need them to admit they were wrong, because I know the day they erased me from their lives was the day they lost the only one who still knew how to protect it. A year after the day I reclaimed the company, the weather turned cold again. Winter in this city always arrives early, and lingers far too long. I stepped into the new office, still the same old building, but now repainted, brighter, cleaner, with nothing left of the past. I stood in the middle of the large meeting room, the one that used to hold my father's portrait, and took a deep breath. There were no more images on the walls, only the soft afternoon light filtering through spotless glass. A strange kind of peace. I placed a small table in the corner of the room. On it, a pumpkin pie, a cheap glass of red wine, and a porcelain plate with a silver rim, the only piece left from our old family dinnerware set. I played a soft jazz tune, drew the curtains, and sat down. No one came. I didn't invite anyone. No father raising a toast, no mother carving turkey, no brother laughing across the table. Just me, and a pleasant silence. I took out an old notebook. The first page still had the words I wrote in my very first year at work. One day, I'll sit at the table, not to serve, but to choose. I had sat, and I had chosen. I ate slowly, sipped slowly. Now and then, I looked up at my reflection in the glass, not to admire, just to be sure that I was really here, fully, completely here. I didn't count how many times I nearly broke down. I don't remember how many times I cursed my father in tears, then felt guilty just minutes later. All I knew was, today I no longer felt angry. No anger, no regret, just peace. This year's Thanksgiving had no clinking glasses, no photos posted online, no hollow wishes, just a woman sitting alone in the very room where she was once cast out like garbage. And now that place was silent, because she had come back, without needing anyone to lead her, without anyone opening the door. As I stood to leave, I carefully folded the napkin, then took a pen and wrote on the back of the first draft menu for our upcoming product. I am grateful, not because they once loved me, but because I survived after they didn't anymore.